So this is a space for no bashfulness. Would you tell the people some of the shows you are responsible for?
Well, Fern was there along the whole way, so everything does go back to Fern. Well, there'll be a lot of Fern mentions, I'm sure, today. Well, just starting out, and I did start my career very early in drama series development at CBS Entertainment, and pretty soon after arriving came the CSI franchise, the CSI.
All the CSI franchises lead back to this woman.
NCIS was kind of right along with it. And then kind of came over a decade of just a bunch of shows that just kept hitting.
Such as?
Without a Trace, Cold Case, Blue Bloods, Criminal Minds, The Good Wife, Elementary.
Look at her face. Look at her face.
Elementary, Person of Interest. Help me, Fern.
And listen, this woman has made $1 billion for
10 billion. I mean, just
for the entertainment industry. It's crazy.
A lot of any of the.
Rush Hour, and then Justin's coming. His show MacGyver, Hawaii Five. You name any drama that you guys have ever watched. This is the person who did it.
Thank you.
so if that's not impressive, I don't know what to say. And you were the head of a network.
Well, I ran drama series development
For
CBS Entertainment, and then I went to Starz.
Starz Network.
And I was president of programming for Starz. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got to pull this out of her. You see, it's not easy for her, but like I want you guys to understand how awesome she is. Now, another theme when people come up to this stage, I keep saying like I brought you here to answer one question, and I want to tell you the one question. I want to lead up to the one question I want you to answer. I was on a movie set. Actually, I'll even go a step before that. Here at our organization, representation really, really matters. I have been at too many professional conferences in the field of psychotherapy where I saw no one on the stage or in the audience that looked like me. Literally no one. And when I was like, I want to contribute some ideas, I experienced horrible, horrific racial experiences. So it became really important to Adam and I that we have an organization that takes representation very seriously. So we are very proud. If you look around this room, it's a very diverse room in all of the ways that you can measure diversity. And that was intentional. We intentionally said, let's try to make a place that is comfortable for everybody. Now, having said that, we, just because of our experiences, often focused a lot about race. But I'm also aware that gender is important too. And I'll tell you a moment when I realized just how difficult it is to be successful in the entertainment industry while being a female. Is I was on a movie set with Tiffany, and Tiffany, so at the morning of the movie set, they called all the stars into hair and makeup. And all of the other stars on this day of filming were male. So it didn't take a ton of makeup to make up the three men, but Tiffany had like layers of makeup she had to have done. And then the scene they were doing had a lot of black lights in the room, and they had to put fake tattoos all over her so the tattoos would light up in the black light. So it's taking her a really long time in hair and makeup. So I'm kind of watching this all evolve, and the three male stars, and when I say stars, I mean super big stars, they got in the van and they got taken to the place where the movie was being shot. Whenever you're on a movie set, which I didn't know, there's always two locations. There's base camp, and then there's wherever they're shooting the scene. So we're at base camp, and Tiffany's in hair and makeup. She showed up on time. She showed up exactly when they told her to be there, and she was incredibly, extraordinarily professional. The three men who got their makeup done much faster because it's easier to make them up, got taken to this place where they were shooting the scene. And then you start hearing these rumblings about Tiffany needs to hurry up.
Oh.
And then the rumblings get louder and louder and more annoyed and more annoyed and more annoyed to the point where people are like upset with Tiffany, who is just sitting in a makeup chair. And I watched this and I thought, no one is actually giving her permission in this moment to be a female. Because she is just sitting. She showed up exactly when they told her to show up, and she is sitting patiently while they're painting on her body, but no one's upset with the process, or are they upset with the makeup artist? They're upset with Tiffany. And I heard like the people who run base camp versus, there's a person who's in charge of base camp, there's a person who's in charge of where they're shooting the scene, and they're angry with Tiffany, who had done nothing wrong except to be female. She had literally done nothing wrong. When she finally had all that stuff done and she was finished, I don't think she'd be bothered by me saying this. She's now got to get in the van and be taken to where the movie's going to be shot, where the scene's going to be shot. And we're walking by her trailer, and she said, "Elliott, I have to stop for a second." And she goes into her trailer, and the door swung open. And she said, very calmly, she said, "Elliott, can you close my door?" And I said, "Yes." So I went up and I closed her door, and I heard her scream at the top of her lungs. Like just absolutely release all of this tension and angst. She just screamed at the top of her lungs. And then she came out looking like the movie star y'all saw today, like made up, perfect, everything perfect in character. She gets in the van and she goes to this scene and she crushed it, right? She crushed it. But people were annoyed with her. And I thought, the only thing she did today was be female. That was it. And it was in that moment I realized this is not an environment patient with the female experience. I remember thinking, like, everyone's really mad at her, and she did nothing wrong. She showed up when they told her to show up. She sat where she needed to be. She went to the set, and she killed it. But she's going to get a reputation of, like, she shows up late, when she did not. She 100% did not. Like, it's an unforgiving thing. I think the thing about privilege and then the absence thereof, with privilege, we give the benefit of the doubt. And when someone does not have privilege, we do not. So the question I want to ask you is, this is historically and like famously a male-dominated space. And you keep winning. How?
It's complicated. No. First and foremost, I have the great benefit of having met a very strong, powerful woman very early when I was just figuring out what I wanted to do and where was I going to fit in and what am I even good at. And her name's Nina Tassler. She was head of drama development when I worked for her at CBS, and then she became president of CBS and then chairperson of CBS. And really my mentor, my guiding light, my North Star, my guardian angel. And I worked with her for over 20 years, and 18 of which she was at the network. I stayed at the network for 20 years, almost to the day. So while, yes, a very male-dominated industry, and actually CBS still a male-dominated place in terms of the upper management, Nina ran her organization of entertainment, and she empowered really strong women. And so there was a group of women, and Fern and Angelica, who's here too, included, who were running departments. If you think about it, every single department, with the exception of a few, were women. And so we were sort of doing our thing and just happy at it. Now, I do know the rung above her was a really hard place to be. And she protected us and really championed us. And I realized when she left just how male-dominated it was. And that upset me, and I left. And then I went out into the world, and then I really realized how good I had it. You know, I
Under
really
this Nina person.
Yeah. And still to this day, you know, I see her once a month or every other month, and I bring, you know, my questions to her and ask her, and a lot of it is, you know, how to find your way, sometimes around it, sometimes how to confront it. She weathered a lot in our defense, and then it just sort of afforded us the ability to do our jobs, quite honestly. But I will say, having gone out into the world, I left CBS and I became a producer at Disney, and then I did go to Starz, and then now, just sort of, again, figuring my way around, got kicked in the teeth a couple times. And to the point that my husband said, maybe your next boss shouldn't be a middle-aged white straight man. I'm just saying, So anyway, it's not that that's the end all. Just a couple experiences where I just really kind of realized that it was like, oh, okay. Not that I haven't heard the stories, but I personally had not encountered that for 2 decades.
You said something a minute ago about like when I experienced these things, I was upset. Mm-hmm. Why did they make you upset instead of quit? You know what I mean? Instead of like give up. Because what I respect about people like you who have to like endure this and go through this is, and I tell people all the time, like even as a black male in the therapy world, the easiest thing for me to do would have to go be and do something within my community. Like I could have easily been like, you know what, I'm gonna open a barbershop. So that way I'm just interacting with, like I don't have to deal with this. Like, yeah. But you kept like working in the TV industry, making television content. What is it in you? What do you have?
I mean, I think at its core, and I've realized this in the last 5 years, really, of my longer journey, failure's not an option. It just isn't. And I've never thought about quitting. I've thought about ways around things, and I've certainly in these last couple years have thought of like, oh gosh, like how do I pivot, or what's plan B, or what's, how could I design this sort of differently? But yeah, no, failure's just not, it's just, I think that's just built in me. I don't know.
Where'd you get it? Because you say something like failure is not an option, but it is. But you actually said, like, I never thought about it, and like it's just built in me. Where did that get installed into you, this idea that failure is not an option?
Well, I discovered therapy about 5 years ago. But again, within the last 2 years, really, I think things have become a little bit clearer for me about why. And I actually went into therapy thinking, like, I want to know why I've made the choices I've made, because I've sort of just done it. Like, I just kind of power my way through to get what I've thought I've wanted. And then I thought, okay, wait, why have I made the decisions I've made in my life? And I think, honestly, I grew up in, and I do think kind of all roads go back to childhood, right? It's sort of like, how were you raised? How were you treated by your mother, father, one or both or none? And I grew up in a really strict Catholic household, and my father was a very sort of old school patriarch. My mother, a crazy Colombian who, screamed a lot and was very dramatic, which is probably where my dramatic storytelling comes from. But I had 2 older brothers. And then when I sort of knew enough to kind of figure out what was going on, I realized that there was just a lot of attention on these 2 boys. And then here I was like the girl. And so a lot of my life has been like, well, wait a minute, I'm just as good, I do just as well, I got all the grades, I got all the, constantly just doing to get, recognized or the attention, and maybe never got it. So that, I think, just kind of propelled me into adulthood. And then I just sort of, I've kind of always known what I've wanted. And so I just sort of, I think, full throttle just have gone for it and figured it out.
Okay, so I can't let you off the hook though.
Yeah.
I mean, how many women have felt overshadowed by a man that you felt more competent than, or at least as competent than? Including if it's just like your sibling, like, how come I'm not getting praise? I got the same grade. But I can't let you off the hook because there's something brilliant and I want to like tap into it. We're all therapists. The story you told of like, I wasn't getting the attention, it is more common that to get attention, we do maladaptive things than it is that we go sell $10 billion worth of television content.
Yeah.
Why did you land on that side of the
I
coin?
know. And honestly, being the bad child was never a thought for me. Like, well, maybe I should do that. Like, I never a thought. I mean, it is like been, do it better, you know, and do it, you know, and I just have never thought to veer right or left. And by the way, I tiptoe kind of to the lines. Like I've done a little of that, but like I've never.
But that's not. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, if you tell me like, here's a child, youngest of 3, the boy's got all the attention, the girl didn't get as much attention. She wants attention. Stripper pole, television executive.
Right.
Which one? You landed here, but the odds were this.
Yes.
Like the odds were like this.
I
and
mean,
like
I don't know.
Heavy odds.
I was kind of afraid of my mom. I got to be honest. Like she really drilled like, you have one reputation. That's it. You'll never get it back. Blah blah blah. So I don't know. I mean, whatever that was, it sort of worked on me in terms of just being better at whatever I attempted, you know. But I do know, and I certainly have encountered people that have similar, you know, setups that have gone a completely different way. And by the way, I had friends along the way that were rebelling and whatnot. And I've been, you know, I've been drawn to those people. Like I'm very drawn to people that are able to kind of break the rules and fly a little looser. But I just have never, I've always stayed in a very structured, sort of safe place, because that is, for me, that just feels more comfortable.
Okay, so you also just used the word that I experience. I was surprised to hear you say it. And you guys catch her say, she said, I've always functioned in a lot of structure in a safe place. And just in case you guys haven't gotten it, like Tiffany Haddish and like Kevin Hart and whatever actor don't exist unless this person can sell the show. So when you're like, I did this safe thing, walking into those boardrooms selling shows doesn't sound safe to me.
Yeah.
How did you?
It's hard to explain, but there is.
I'm gonna keep poking.
No. And it's the draw for me, because honestly, I think when I was younger and people would say, what do you want to do? I want to be a movie star. I want to be an actress. I want to be, you know, all these things that perform. And then just as reality kind of hit, and I became, one of my first jobs out of college, I was a writer's assistant for a show called Sisters on the Warner Brothers lot, and it was like Disneyland. And I didn't even really know what a writer's room was, and they really just wanted someone to go get them lunch at the end of the day, which I was perfectly happy doing. But I got to sit in a room, and then I thought, oh my God, no, this is storytelling. This is like, oh my God. And I was getting excited, and then I thought, maybe I'll be a writer. And then I thought, oh, they don't know where their next job is coming from. They don't know their next pay. Like, they don't have any sort of guidelines or structure around their life. But then when I found development, it was like the best of every world, because I could play inside of a job, you know, and that job meant a lot to me, because I think just my father, being very old school, had like one job. And so I thought, oh, you know, if I can go and it's probably why I stayed at CBS for so long, It was like, if I could stay at one job for a long time, like I'll make my dad proud, or it'll sort of feel. So the unwieldiness of the entertainment business is like, there's something that scares me about it, but I found my security inside of a job called development, and then I was able to, kind of stretch a little bit.
Yeah, you're saying, okay, so one of the things that Adam and I have been teaching for almost 15 or 20 years is how important it is. So therapy is known for like helping people solve a problem, but we don't believe that's the purpose of therapy. We think the purpose of therapy is to help people like find their purpose, find their place. Like how you just said, like I found development, and then I could play it. It was like the best of all the worlds, and I could do the thing. How did you know you had found it? Like when you were like, I'm in the writer's room and did this and now I'm here. Mm-hmm. How did you know you had found your place?
I mean, honestly, it was early because I got a temp position on Nina Tassler's desk. And again, they said, go to building 140, it's called development. I had no idea what that was. I had been running around the lot doing all these other jobs. And then I sat there and everyone kept saying, Nina this, Nina that, Nina. I'm going, who's this Nina you speak of, And in she zips, she's like this tall, she's like 4 feet tall. She zips in and she sat at her desk. She used to smoke at her desk too, which is crazy. And she's smoking and she's calling and she's on the phone and she's saying, you get me so into blah, 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 and this writer and that director and blah, blah, blah. And then, I'm listening to her and I'm watching her and I tempted her for 2 weeks. I cleaned her ashtray at night. I looked at her notes. I was blah, blah, blah. And then I called my mom and dad and I was like, I found it.
How did you know?
I just knew. I don't know. I think it was the mixture of this thing called I loved television, mm-hmm. and I loved that writing experience and sort of how free that felt. But then once I put it together that this woman gets to kind of play in all of those sandboxes, but then she gets to put it together. And I won't pretend and say that like control is a big theme in my life. And so that notion of being able to control that, I think was like, I'm gonna try that. And I waited for her, by the way. I had graduated from UCLA with a degree in poli-sci, and I thought maybe news, politics, something. And when I called home and I said to my mom and dad, I think I found it, but the job's not available. I have to wait until she either promotes her assistant or the assistant leaves or whatnot. And so I hung out in another temp position in business affairs down the hall. And I know they were like, wait, what is she doing? What is she waiting for? What's happening? It took a minute. It took being able to actually work on something that then made it to air. Mm-hmm. And then I could show them and then I could explain to them kind of what I was part of for it to register. But I just knew there was something so wholly creative and something structured that somehow fit together.
Now, so I want to highlight something she just said, which is so important, which sticks to like why we teach what we teach the way we teach it. Like life sucks. Like it just does. Like there's a curveball around the next corner. Life is problem laden. Like it just is. But when a person finds their place, they immediately get stronger. And something Christina just said highlights this, right? So here's Christina, and she's kind of bopping around the world. She finds this Nina person, and she calls her parents, and it's like, I really want you guys to hear this because this is so important for the experiences our clients have. So she calls her parents and she says, I found it, but it's not available now. Did you guys hear that? Mm. And because she knew, like, this is the place I want to be, her brain immediately found a pathway to get it. I got to go hang out down the hall and just wait for it. And she said, it took a minute, but you were right. You ended up working for underneath that person for 20 years, and you still see that person to this day. The problem is, if we try to like solve people's problems, we remove their ability to be strong, because that took strength and discipline and courage and patience. And for someone who likes control, usually control and then patience. Like we don't have both high. And I think that's so masterfully stated, that when someone understands their role and their purpose, they're immediately stronger and more resilient and more capable. Did you guys hear that? See how important that is? So I have one more question, then I'm gonna open. What do you think Nina saw in you? Because I immediately said, like, how did you do all these things? And the first thing you said was, before I do anything else, I have to talk about this Nina person. But I'm betting if Nina were here, she didn't just mentor everybody that walked across her desk. What do you think Nina saw in you that told her this Christina person might have something?
I mean, probably from the get-go, just enthusiasm. And then I think it kicked, like, the loyalty, the commitment. You know, I was so committed to it that I was always 10 steps ahead of her as her assistant. So it was she always has this joke that she'd come out and be like, I need you know, and she's kind of all over the place. And so it was always like, how do I stay as organized as possible when she asks for something? And she'd say, where's that memo about the this and the that? And I'd go, and I'd just like go back into a cabinet, because I would know exactly where that was. And then I'd go, and I'd just present it. And she was always like, how did you do that? Like, and so I think she just had an appreciation that I was present and I was committed and I was like, just like ready for it. And then, you know, and then a friendship builds, you know? And then I think, you know, she was my boss the whole time, and that was always evident, but we became, you know, she became a surrogate mother for me, really.
Right.
Yeah.
I lied. I said one more question, but I'm going to ask another question. I'm trying to think how to ask it. I know that you worked for a particular person where Me Too became relevant.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that? How did you navigate that? And the reason I ask is I really I think representation is so important, and regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, we should be able to pursue our dreams and wishes and goals in our careers.
Yeah.
And there was a situation at CBS that was very turbulent.
Yeah.
How did you manage that?
So, and many people ask this because I was there so long. I saw things that had the markings of being inappropriate. I was never witness to anything specifically, and I'm blessed to say I've never been put in a compromising situation like that, ever, with anybody at CBS or there otherwise. But I did notice that there were, you know, actresses or assistants or other, you know, maybe executive type women that something was happening, and so I think I thought, oh, okay, I guess that's happening over there. It's not happening where I am and in my immediate circle. Somebody somewhere seems okay with this. And really, I mean, I think back and it's like, people say, did you ever think to complain? It's like, to who? That person would be the end stop is the person that you're talking about, you know? So it's like, and it just seemed like that. I don't know. I never really thought too hard about it. And then it was when I left CBS that I started to get a lot of phone calls from journalists, and I thought, oh wow, like this is bigger than I ever thought. And so when it all sort of came out, it all made sense to me. Like I did not question whether it was, happening or not. But again, I'll go back to Nina protected her inner sanctum. She just protected us, and it just never came, at least for me, into my everyday interaction. Now, it is hard. It is hard to say, oh, well, I spent 20 years in an environment where like now cat's out of the bag and it's like everybody knows. But again, I don't know that anybody's so shocked by it, And what's harder to explain is that like you didn't say anything, but it also, I don't know. It just seemed like that person in charge, like, who were you going to complain to?
But the part, and I am going to open up for questions now, but the part that I respect a lot is when a woman is even around that environment, whether it's happening in your circle or not, it's got to be hard to hold on to your integrity. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not even talking about, looking back, why didn't you say anything? I'm actually like super impressed by anybody that could hold on to their character in an environment that was so toxic, even if it was just around. Because that must have been very, very difficult for every single woman in the building, whether it was touching you directly or just something you were aware of, because there's like this underlying thing where women aren't being treated with a level of fairness, and there was an expectation on certain women that wasn't there for the men, and I respect you a lot for that. I respect Fern and Angelica, like the people who had to deal with this environment while all this stuff was going on, but yet held on to their character is amazing to me.
I will say, I think you find your bonds within that, honestly, and I think we sort of found each other, and we could kind of complain to one another, or that sort of thing, and then you find strength in numbers.
Right.
Do even though you're really just adapting. Yeah.
So who has questions for this amazing person? I saw Mim first, and then Jennifer.
Can I ask the question?
I still have veto power. But the question is, when you hear a story or a pitch, how do you know that there's something here or there's not? Like, what's the thing that's like, there's something we can do with this?
Okay. So yeah, I'll go back to the concept, and there are examples of this, but when you hear a pitch and the concept itself has familiar elements, because TV shows do and have to in order for people to let them in, but if it has a hook or just a left of center, I always say it's the why here, why now, especially because television is so cyclical and it's, there's so much. But how do you tap into something that's happening maybe in the world or with people, or a theme, or again, a variation of a theme? That in and of itself, like if I hadn't heard it and it's like, oh, that's really interesting, that's where ears perk up. And then I will say, even if the concept isn't this sort of mesmerizing thing in and of itself, when the writer, who's usually pitching the concept, I always say it's like if it's coming out of their pores, right? It's like it's just because they breathe it, they are living it, they're built to tell that story. It's evident to me, and a lot of times I've bought those projects because I may not know exactly what the poster is or how to sell it or what 7 seasons are, but I know that person is gonna do their damnedest to deliver that, and that and again, it becomes special in its point of view.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because as a television consumer my whole life, I never really thought about, I just sat down like different strokes. Just gonna watch it. But like at the time in which you first heard of NCIS, we hadn't.
Yeah.
Like, you were the one to be like, I think people will watch that. But
Yeah.
like, obviously people have watched it and watched it forever, but like, I just turned on to NCIS.
Yeah.
That's an amazing skill, I think. So
Well, and as an example, just Robert and Michelle King, who created The Good Wife, they had come in, and of course we've heard legal shows up the wazoo, right? So it's like, okay, what's the angle in? What's the take? And they were, sort of sitting back watching the news, and it was, Elliot Spitzer was sort of the poster for that when they've been out and about on press tours and talking about what's the inspiration. Elliott was really just one of maybe 10 men at that point that had been caught in a scandal, and they're at a press conference, but they're looking over the shoulder of the man at the woman who's just sitting there like fidgeting with her ring, or she's got her Chanel suit on and is just smiling. It's like, no, wait, what is she thinking? And so that, again, when they come in and they pitch a show about a fish out of water, a woman who went to law school but never practiced law, she's going back to work because she has to, because her, jerk of a husband who's up on a podium and is a career politician has cheated on her. That's the point of view, and that's what makes it special and unique. So
I just find that incredible because you're the one who decided we'd all get to watch it. Based upon, I think people will watch that. It's just a fascinating.
I'll tell you what, just sorry, one little thing, just because we're on The Good Wife and you just said that. We heard that pitch at 5:00 on a Thursday, okay? And I had a colleague, and there were other people in the department, and we were tired, and it was pitch season, and we had heard maybe 7 or 8 pitches that day, and it was late, and I knew that my colleague needed to go because he had something to get to. We heard the pitch, and there's a signal that we would make to each other if we really loved it and wanted to buy it in the room. We would make a signal to each other, and we'd just buy it. But there was no signal that day. Like, I made the signal, but he didn't make the signal, and so I was like, okay, you know what? We're tired. We'll figure this out. We can, He out the door. And so I just figured, the next morning we always regroup, blah, blah, blah. And I drove in early that next morning. It was a Friday morning. And I usually would get in early to read because it's quiet. And I was driving, and a very good friend of mine who happened to be attached to the project called me. And I picked up the phone and I said, hello. And he's like, how could you? I said, how could I what? It's like 6:30 in the morning. Like, what have I done? And he said, you're passing? And I said, no, we're not passing. What are you talking about? Like, no. And he goes, I just got a call. I got an email from my agent that you're passing. And I said, we're definitely not passing. And then it's starting to occur to me, oh my God, my colleague passed. And I'm not kidding, it's 6:30 in the morning. And so I said, I'll call you back. And I'm pissed. I mean, I am like, but I'm.
This is the question I want to ask you.
I know.
If you were a male, would he have done that?
No, and it's going to get to the root of your sort of like the composure inside of a system that. And I did. I drove in and I sat at my desk, and it was an hour and a half before anybody started to show up. And I was waiting, and we shared a wall. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and I heard him barrel in. Good morning, everybody. Blah blah blah. And by the way, he is a very good friend of mine. By the way, and I will not say his name, but he is a very good person. No, he's a very good person, and he's a good guy. But he's good morning, everybody. Blah blah. And I'm like, whoosh, the fire coming out of my ears. And I gave him a minute. He got his coffee. Blah blah blah. And I went and I said, how dare you? And he said, what? And I said, you passed, did you? And he said, yeah, on that stupid pitch? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, here's how it's gonna go, okay? We're doing it, okay? And you're gonna like it, okay? And that was a mistake, and this is how you cover it, and blah, 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 blah. And we did. And he came to love the project, okay? But it was just, there was a moment that he just, I don't know, he was thinking about where he needed to be, and he didn't get it right away. It was also like it's a female point of view. You know, like there's a lot of reasons we can point to. But I would have bought the project anyway, but you sure as hell better know like that thing was going to be good.
So,
and then cut to, you know.
So here's my question though, like when that kind of thing happens, like your instinct is like we're going to buy this show and some person, in this case this particular guy says no. Years later, when you win Emmys and the show's big, do you ever like walk by their office, like drop the Emmy, like, oh, sorry, let me pick up the Emmy. just you almost missed it. Do you ever do that?
No.
I would be all about. I would get Emmy tattooed on my face.
That's funny. No, and again, he was part of the team that made the show go. Do you know?
Yeah.
So it was just that it was that moment, that moment of the pitch. It could have gone very differently.
You're a better person than me.
Yeah.
I'd be mad at Emmys.
It's all good.
Alyssa, the first part of the question is
Emotion.
what emotion are you looking for when people are pitching to you? And then what do you see as your purpose for your role in entertainment now?
Well, I'll go back to Mim's talk because you did say something that just, I was like, I'm hanging on to that. Truth is a hit. That's it. It's truth is a hit. You know it when you hear it. You feel it. It's real, you know. And I'm learning, you know, through my own life and my own journey that I've always looked at vulnerability as a weakness personally, for me. I always look for it in other people. I'm always like, you know, but tell me about that and tell me about that. And I always think that like the more raw, the better, the uglier, the better. You know what I mean? Like just, and what I'm learning is about me, like I have to let down some of those barriers to really sort of partake and to, but my role, and I feel, and I go back to, it's sort of like, well, what am I good at? I feel like, and not unlike Mim, you with the people you've worked with to bring their story out, it's letting people tell their stories. You know, really, I'm a facilitator of that, and I love being in that role. Right now, I'm in a producing role, and I'm sort of still feeling my way around. Like, well, what is that? There's a lot of the overlap in that, but I think it's about letting voices come out and letting voices, and that's where diversity will come out. You know, it's different points of view and you know, stories we haven't heard before. Yeah.
That's kind of what we do, help people facilitate.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, we help people tell their stories
from
a perspective that's in line with their truth.
Yeah.
Jennifer's saying like at an early age for Jennifer, she'd be intimidated around like even her supervisor. But how do you go about this world without struggling with something called imposter syndrome, which we experience a lot even in our work?
Yeah. You know what? I think in a weird way, like I'm thinking back to my 20s where like ignorance is bliss, right? Like if I knew then what I know now, I'd be much more intimidated. But I think I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I do think imposter syndrome for me hit a little bit later, you know, when I do start to, you know, really sort of see people in very, you know, successful, powerful positions, and they seem so prepared and they seem so well equipped. And then I think, well, wait. So when I compare, that's where I start to get myself into trouble, because that's where, versus I have something completely different to offer or wholly unique to offer. And so I hope that answered it. Okay.
Dennis, are there any people online? By the way, this side of the room sucks. You guys are not asking any questions.
She raised her hand right here.
Celeste raised her hand. Okay, so we're going to go to Dennis online to see if anybody in virtual land has any questions. And then this side of the room might get to chime in.
Yeah, we had a question that says, how do you know you are now seen and heard?
Who's the person who asked that?
Michelle.
Michelle. Shout out to Michelle twice. Everybody else, you suck too in virtual land.
I mean, that is a really difficult question for me, because in these few years of therapy, my my insecurity comes from not being seen and not being heard. I mean, that as a child, it was like, just to be seen and heard was like my goal. And so, and I don't know, I think maybe that's where the deflection comes in of sort of like, you know what, if I just keep doing what I enjoy doing and I keep doing it and it feels good to me and it feels like Tiffany with the dopamine hit, I related to that because sometimes I get dopamine hits from just feeling efficient, you know, which is weird. I'm not up on a stage, you know, entertaining people, but you know, it's sort of like what makes me feel good at the end of the day that like I achieved something that day. Anyway, sometimes that's it. But being seen and heard, I mean, I think that's everybody. I mean, that's part of what I look for in other people telling their story, you know, is sort of like giving that to people, you know, seeing them, hearing them, that sort of thing. So I still have a ways to go.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So here she is, like admitting, like I want to be seen and heard, but when I point out things, she's like, is it hard for you to be seen and heard, even though you seek being seen and heard?
I haven't totally felt like I still have a lot to do. You know, like I just feel like I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever get there. Like, I think you had asked a question earlier of like, and maybe it was Tiffany, of sort of like, well, when did you know that you made it? And it was sort of like, I wouldn't even know how to answer that question.
How did you know there was more?
Checkpoints, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you know you had arrived and there was more? Is that right?
Again, and I've never looked at it like, oh, that was the moment I arrived, you know, like it for me, and I've had to explore this in these last couple years because I really have had to say, what am I doing? What do I want to be doing? And in this changing landscape of entertainment, it's a very different place right now. And so I was sort of trying to be introspective of sort of like, well, what do I want to be doing that will make me feel like I'm advancing on some achievement? And for me, it's like there's a hum. There's a hum for me. Like when I'm doing what I love doing and it feels like I've contributed or I've had some impact on something and have moved a project forward or a writer forward or a script forward, I just get a hum. And it's like, and I just kept saying over these last couple of years where I've been looking for my next thing, it's like, I just want the hum again. I want a hum. Like that's kind of it. And maybe in its simplicity, that's growth for me, you know? Sort of like answering that question is probably a lot of money toward therapy, but because I'm trying to drill down of sort of like what are the things that just make me feel happy, and that for me is success.
Do you want me to answer it too? Mm-hmm. My answer is going to be way less amazing than that. My drug of choice is momentum. I live in absolute fear of stagnation. I can't even tolerate the thought of complacency. So I always want to push a little bit further and try to do a little bit more. And how I know that I'm in the right space, I was actually just talking to Anna about that yesterday when we've got this big business, we're thinking about what's next, what we're going to do, and we've like committed, like everything we do must be in the helping space, because that's what feels right. Like we're not going to go start like a t-shirt company tomorrow or a coffee company tomorrow, even though Anna probably would love to start a. What did you say? We do pajamas. But to me, like the healing space just feels right because it feels like it's in my heart, and I just can't handle stagnation. So like even envisioning an event like this, I would talk to Adam, I would talk to Anna, I would talk to Cecil. I'd be like, I think that somebody like her has an incredible story, and as therapists, we need to hear it because we keep giving up on our clients without even realizing we're doing it. And I want you to come explain how you did the things you did. And then when you're doing a therapy session and it feels like all hope is lost, I want you to remember Christina. I want you to remember.
There's hope. No, I'm kidding.
It's true. I want you to remember that Tiffany Haddish slept in a car in front of the building she would one day be a co-owner of. Think about that for just a second. Like, she was asleep in a car in front of the Laugh Factory where she would one day be one of the co-owners of the business.
Yeah.
I want you thinking about that when you're doing therapy, because your client is going to be saying stuff to you like, I'm so depressed I can't even get out of bed. I want you to, Tiffany Haddish owned the building she was leaving in front of. You can get out of bed. Don't say it like that. Don't. But that's the attitude I want you to have. Like, I want you to believe in your client. Like, I'm almost crying right now. I want you to believe in your clients with so much, like, conviction that someone might think you're crazy. Because I know when my grandmother believed in me, people thought she was crazy. Because I was acting stupid when I was 10 and 12. But my grandmother knew my father was abusing me. So my grandmother gave me permission to be stupid, and she never once gave up on me ever. So somehow I just thought I was worthy. And that's a ridiculous thing, but I just thought I was worthy because you never quit. I promise you, your clients just need you to not quit. Like, you think you're just good at, I'm gonna tell y'all right now, I'm not good at solution-focused brief therapy. In fact, I think it's kind of bullshit. You wanna know the truth? What I'm really good at is not giving up on people, and I use solution-focused brief therapy to communicate my lack of ability to give up. That's why I always talk to you guys about the astronaut question. When a 10-year-old child tells you I want to be an astronaut, the only acceptable response is, what planet do you want to go to? Anything else sounds like doubt, and you don't believe in that kiddo.
Yeah.
You have to talk to people as if they can achieve, and somehow they achieve. Now, sometimes, like my grandmother, sometimes it was an investment. My grandmother talked to the knucklehead 10-year-old because she knew he was going to be a brilliant 27-year-old. And to this day, I don't know how she knew that, but she knew it. I remember maybe the coolest thing, I don't even remember which book it is, but one of my books is dedicated to my grandmother. And I was so excited. I was like, Grandma. And if you turn to that first page, it says dedicated to Annette Hellum. And I was like, Grandma, look. And my grandmother had no shock at all. Like, if someone dedicates a book to you, be like, yay, something. My grandmother opened the page. I'm not making this up. My grandmother opened the page. She looked at it and she goes, I knew it.
I love it.
And just sat it down. I was like, Grandma, read it. She just went, I knew it. Put it down.
Yeah.
Like, that's a crazy level of belief. But be crazy. Like, be psychotic. Be psychopathically interested in people and their ability to change, and they change.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give Tim the privilege of asking the last question.
That was better than what I was going to ask. So you talked about being driven, performance-driven as a child. It was kind of instilled in you by some reputation and performance. And you seem like you really pride yourself on that. And that's what gets you going. When you have an efficient day, you feel like you've achieved something, right? So you also said failure is not an option. Is there a time, we've talked to a lot of people today that tell us about times they were really struggling, right? And how that was a gift later, going through that. Do you have a time like that when you feel like you failed and had to recover?
In all honesty, not until recently. Yeah. And not that things were easy per se, but they've been relatively easy. And I've worked hard. So it's sort of like I've I think equated working hard with being able to achieve things or get things or go to a school or a college or get a job. But it wasn't until recently where I really felt like, oh my gosh, is it an option? Is this, could this? And it's just a series of a lot of events, in my life, but it's given me a new perspective for sure. But I too listen to the stories that you're mentioning here, and I'm in awe of those kinds of challenges early in life. I just didn't have those kinds of obstacles. I think I just had a very strong-willed mother and a very, it's like whatever that combination was, it just sort of drilled an ethic into me that just sort of set me in motion. I hope that answers that.
I got another completely unrelated question.
It's got to be quick.
This is about true crime.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I'm southeast, so I don't know, but it seems like all the women down there watching these true crime shows.
Yes.
And by extrapolation of that, they think everybody's a serial killer, right? They won't be. You can't hitchhike anymore. I don't know if it's post-COVID or whatever, but they'll throw stuff at you. It's just not. It's changed. Something's changed. Do you know what that is, and what this fascination with true crime and how that affects the fear content in society in general?
I'm obsessed with true crime, obviously.
She's made all the true crime.
No, when my daughter said Nancy Grace, I was like, "We've got a problem." I've been listening to too many podcasts within earshot. I think that there's and women do drive this. There is something about mysteries and solving mysteries and being able to partake in storytelling that puts you just a few steps ahead of the people solving the crime, so that you feel like you solved it, and there's a lot of very very skilled people that put those things together to make the audience feel that way. I think for me personally, I love prison shows too, because I don't want to be in a prison, but I want to be a fly on the wall in a prison. And so I love just there's something about peeking in, and that's got to be the fascination, is that there is this other element that, and it's creeping even closer in society. These people are being exposed because of technology or DNA or whatever it is, but I just think the fascination is solving a riddle, solving a puzzle, solving a crime, and then having eyes into something you wouldn't otherwise see with your own.
Which I hadn't thought about that before, but there's a prison show that I love called 60 Days In. Have you ever seen that?
Oh
I
yeah.
can't get enough of that.
Oh yeah.
I ain't going in there, but I'm gonna happily watch the peak they gave me to be in there.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Elliott.